but now we want to bring in our political analysts.
Yes, we have with us former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot and also Pat Brady. He is with us as well, former member of the Republican National Committee. Mayor, let's start with you. We touched on it in our news at 5:30. This has been a long time coming, a lot of planning that you were involved with. How does it feel right now, a day out?
It feels great. The energy inside and outside the building, I think, is really at an all-time high. Saw a lot of volunteers today that were incredibly enthusiastic. You see some of the delegates from the various states that when they're practicing the roll call. It's an excitement in the building. I felt excited. I had goosebumps listening to it. I think people are ready. They feel a level of enthusiasm that they might not have felt even just a couple of weeks ago. So people are happy to be here in Chicago and ready to get going.
All right, Pat, I want to turn to you because you were, of course, with Joe at the RNC and now being here with us at the DNC. If you, of course, were a day out from when the actual events go on, but what do you think the major differences in the way the RNC and the DNC are approaching their conventions?
Well, the RNC did a nice job of what they put on in Milwaukee, and it was actually a tremendous convention for Republicans up until 12 minutes into Donald Trump's speech. And he went off. Joe and I were sitting there watching the teleprompter go, we had the speech in front of us, like, what is he talking about?
That's not on there.
That's not on there. But it was a horrible speech, and I think that kind of deflated the enthusiasm. But I will say the difference here, we talked about it a little bit ago, this one just feels bigger. Maybe it's the venue, maybe it's the city, but this feels like a bigger event than what we had in Milwaukee. More diverse, more interest, more enthusiasm. Again, it may just be because it's in a place like Chicago, but they seem right now like they have got it. The Democrats have an awful lot of momentum going with them.
Let's touch a little bit more on the RNC, Pat, but I'd like to get both of your thoughts on this. The Republicans spent a lot of time going after Joe Biden, primarily. This was before he had dropped out, but also Kamala Harris. Do you think the Democrats this week, Mayor, do the same thing, or do they focus on a message and focus on their philosophies?
Look, I think you're going to hear a little bit of both, but I think President Biden's going to talk about kind of the existential threat to our democracy that Donald Trump poses. Others may do the same, but my hope is, frankly, that a lot of the energy is around what Democrats have to offer, really building up Kamala Harris's bio, because a lot of Americans still don't really know who she is. And I think she has really set the tone by offering a positive, nuanced message of hope. She's not going to let the slings and arrows go ignored, but she doesn't have to, as my team used to tell me, you don't have to swing at every pitch. And when you do, make sure that you're connecting. And to stretch the baseball analogy probably too far, her biggest challenge, but I think the greatest opportunity, is to reach those people who are now paying attention to this election in a way that they weren't a month ago. And that's a lot of folks.
Well, it comes down, it's still, although the numbers have changed, the dynamics of the race haven't changed at all.
No.
It's 6, now maybe 7 states in play. The same 300,000 voters that these two campaigns have been targeting for a year. So a lot has changed, but a lot hasn't changed. I expect, I think if they should be focusing their comments this week, I agree with what you said, reintroducing Kamala Harris to the country, but also they can't go too far left here.
No.
They got to stay in between the guardrails and tell the American people that we have a vision here and we have a plan, but it's not an extreme on either side.
Yeah, it's a tough balancing act, but for me, and I'm sure there's smarter political minds out there that are advising Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, they can't take any vote for granted. And you're right that there's 6 or 7 states, and it seems like that list grows every day, which is, I think, good news for the Democrats. But they can't take for granted states like Illinois and other places that are deep blue to make sure that the numbers are large enough that they come out and really win that popular vote. Having people sit home is a death knell for, frankly, either the two tickets.
And that's the enthusiasm gap right now.
Yeah.
They have a lot of enthusiasm. One other interesting poll number that came out today, in the I think it was the ABC poll, that she has a 20-point advantage in likability, which is a big deal because we only had 80 days. We're not going to have any great supply side economic debate in 80 days. It's going to be who do you like and who do you trust. And I agree with you completely. Stay on the future. Stay on the future. Stay on the future. And that comment that Tim Walz made in his speech about bringing joy back, that really resonates. People are just kind of fed up of the fighting. and they want something positive, and they want a vision, and she has to convince the American people that she cares about them.
Yes. Pat, to one point that you were making about not going too far left, there is a speaker, a Republican speaker, Adam Kinzinger, who will be here among what, Mayor, I'm wondering if you even thought that that was on their radar. If we talk about, of course, Barack Obama, former President Clinton, the First Ladies, the former First Ladies, but to have him in the mix, appealing to potentially a voter group that wouldn't necessarily vote Democrat.
I'm not surprised at all. I mean, Adam Kinzinger, I think, has really made his point before he left office and since that Trump is a real threat to our democracy. We know that there's a Republican group, Republicans for Harris, that has sprung up in the midst of all this enthusiasm. And so I think, and Pat knows this better than I do, there are a lot of people out there who are never Trumpers, who aren't going to stay home. They feel like it's their role as a citizen in this democracy to vote. And a guy like Kinzinger on the speaking list, speaking to those Republicans, those independents, and telling them why it's important to cast a D vote in November, I think is a very powerful thing.
And now there's an alternative. And we said this at the Republican convention before Biden got out. There's no alternative for some of those Nikki Haley kind of voters with Joe Biden, because he was just too old after that debate performance. But now there's an alternative. But she's got to make the sale.
Yes.
She's got 80 days. She's got to have a good debate. She's got to have a couple good interviews at some point. Don't do it until you have to. But if she can keep that going, I think she got a pretty good shot. And so far, the execution, and Democrats are usually pretty screwed up, as you know, Mayor. Sometimes
we love to fight each other. But I'll tell you this: I think one of the other things that history will describe this, but having this Midwestern high school football coach as her VP. I grew up in Ohio, in a small town where Friday Night Lights was the real deal. That's what people rallied for year round. And having a guy who can tap into that enthusiasm in places all over the country, I just think let him go. And he is going to bring people to the table that the Democrats could ordinarily not reach.
The best political speech, one of the best I've ever seen, Coach Mike Ditka at a Sarah Palin rally in 2000, 5,000 people. He blew the doors off the place. But it was the football coach, that kind of speech. They really do know how to give good speeches.
Well, you're the perfect
Someday we'll have a conversation about Mike Ditka and Sarah Palin. Not here. Not now.
Yeah. There's a lot of things we're going to have to talk about, Mayor, I'm sure.
Make sure you join us on the stream.
Yeah, make sure that's on the air.
That's where the real conversations go down. Pat, you're a perfect one to ask about this, though, as a more traditional Reagan conservative. You've got a guy like Adam Kinzinger who, voted with Trump, I think, in more than many members of the Freedom Caucus, and he's bum rushed out because he's not willing to, bow to Donald Trump. What happens to the Republican Party if Trump loses in 24?
Hopefully a new and a more traditional conservative leader emerges. I mean, I'm a man without a country now. When I listened to the speeches at the convention a month ago, I go, that speech could have been given by Dick Gephardt. The Democratic labor guy, the speech that J.D. Vance gave. So there's a lot of us that, even on policy, not personality, don't have a party anymore. We're not isolationists. We believe in staying in NATO and supporting our allies. We're conservative. We believe in limited government because we just don't think government's the answer to everything. So there's no home for people like that right now. But there is an opportunity, I think, for the Democrats to pick up some of those voters on the promise that we're going to be. I mean, you had to kind of do this a little bit when you were running. Listen, I'm not an enemy of business. I'm not an enemy of people trying to make money and not come off as overly progressive. I think she can get some of those voters because they just are not going to vote for Trump.
Yeah, so, Mayor, if you could take us through comparing your strategy when you were running to office to what you think needs to happen for Vice President Harris now.
Well, there's really no comparison, but I will say this. I think she has been very smart in the way in which she is messaging, and frankly, the way that her campaign is messaging. I keep saying to my old political team, who are these people in this campaign? It doesn't feel the same at all. They've been very smart on social media. They've been very smart in a way that they're kind of trolling Trump and Vance, but not engaging in the mudslinging back and forth. I think this is really textbook, and if they can stay on this higher ground by hitting him when necessary, but really talking about the future, it's really classic and textbook. And I think, frankly, they are clearly learning the lessons from 16. They're learning the lessons from 20, which was obviously a hard-fought and very close race. She's got people around her, and I got to give her her own credit, because if the candidate can't carry the message, you can have all the great advisors in the world. She's doing a phenomenal job.
But remember, with all this, it could not be a more perfect rollout. She's done a great job. It's a dead heat.
Yeah.
So this, he's got his 46% of the country, 80 million Americans, that no matter what are going to vote for him. So the turnout component in those 7 states is critical,
Well,
and that's absent a mistake on top of it. So
Correct.
she's going to have to draw an inside straight to win this, but she's done phenomenally so far.
They're showing up in North Carolina now. That says a lot about where the campaign
Well, it'll be interesting election night, too. We might even get a preview earlier than we think, because Florida, some of those turnouts in the Carolinas and up the East Coast are going to tell us a lot about what's going to happen in the rest of the country.
Exactly.
Listen, there's enthusiasm in Texas. I got a text today from a friend of mine that lives in Texas. You're not going to find a lot of Democrats down there, but the energy in places that you wouldn't expect is really through the roof.